The labyrinth is not a mere construction of stone and myth. It is the oldest metaphor of the human condition. Every culture that sought to express the mystery of life has inscribed its lines on rocks, temple floors, cathedral naves, or the silent deserts of Egypt. Unlike the maze, which is a trap for the mind, the labyrinth is a map for the soul. Its single, winding path does not seek to bewilder, but to awaken. Each curve echoes the shape of time itself, cyclical, recursive, and purposeful. To walk the labyrinth is to enter the architecture of becoming, where confusion itself becomes sacred. In ancient Crete, where King Minos ruled and the Minotaur waited at the center, the labyrinth was both prison and passage. It symbolized the descent into one's own shadow, a psychological underworld Jung would later call the realm of individuation. Theseus's journey into the darkness was not a conquest of a beast, but of the self. Ariadne's thread, so fragile, so human, was the thread of memory, guiding him back through chaos. Every seeker who dares the labyrinth must carry such a thread, a remembrance of meaning that outlasts terror. The Egyptian labyrinth of Hawara, described by Herodotus as greater than the pyramids, was more than architecture. It was cosmology rendered in limestone. 12 courts reflected the 12 divisions of the land and of the heavens. Beneath the earth, 1,500 chambers mirrored those above, a microcosm of the universe and of consciousness itself. To enter was to move through the layers of reality, from the visible world of matter to the invisible realm of spirit. Each chamber echoed the doctrine of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so below, so without. But the labyrinth is older still, carved into prehistoric stone, in Galicia, in Italy, in Sardinia, where its coiled pattern spoke to the intuition of rebirth. The ancients traced it not for amusement, but for initiation. The initiate who walked its turns reenacted the journey of death and return, the descent into chaos and the emergence into order. Each turn was a threshold, each step a dialogue between fear and revelation. The labyrinth thus became the first psychological map, thousands of years before psychology was born. To the philosophers of Greece, the labyrinth was the mind's geometry. Plato used it as metaphor for dialectic, an argument that turns upon itself, leading not to confusion, but to clarity. When we thought we were at the end, he wrote, we came out again at the beginning. This was not irony, but insight. That wisdom is not found in straight lines. Truth is spiraled. Every question that seems to lead us astray merely brings us closer to the center of knowing. In Christian mysticism, the labyrinth was reborn on the floors of cathedrals. Pilgrims who could not reach Jerusalem instead walked the labyrinth of Chartres, each step a prayer. The winding path stood for the soul's long pilgrimage through sin, doubt, and darkness toward divine illumination. Yet even in sanctity, the design retained its pagan heart, the ancient pattern of descent and return. Christ himself was the hero who entered the underworld and emerged reborn, as Theseus once did, as the alchemist always must. In the language of depth psychology, this journey is the individuation process, the reconciliation of opposites within. Carl Jung saw in the labyrinth a diagram of the unconscious, a coiling path that leads inward to the self. The monster within the maze is the shadow, that which the ego represses and fears. To meet it is to meet the forgotten parts of one's being. Like Theseus, we must face what devours us, not with sword alone, but with compassion, for within the darkness lies the very energy of transformation. The labyrinth also expresses the principle of cosmic return. All things spiral toward their origin. Every exile from the center is temporary, for the pattern itself guarantees reunion. The path that seems to diverge is secretly convergent. Thus, the labyrinth teaches the soul to trust time, to see in apparent delay the rhythm of divine intelligence. Borges understood this when he wrote that time itself is a labyrinth, that every decision opens infinite paths which nonetheless meet again in eternity. Yet not all labyrinths are made of stone. There are labyrinths of ideology, of illusion, of the hypernormal realities we build to comfort ourselves. As Elizabeth Kim observed, we are surrounded by the labyrinths of consumerism and conformity, junk heaps of distraction that seduce us from purpose. Like Sarah in the film Labyrinth, humanity wanders among its own toys, forgetting the child it meant to save, the soul itself. Awakening begins when we declare, as she did, "It's all junk," and remember the quest. Thus begins the journey. The labyrinth opens not with certainty, but with sacred confusion. The first step is bewilderment. The first revelation, disorientation. For the soul must be unmade before it can be remade. Every seeker who enters the spiral must surrender control, trusting that the very act of walking, step by step, turn by turn, is itself the alchemy. The labyrinth does not lead us away from ourselves. It draws us inward, toward the still point where all circles meet, and where the soul remembers it has walked this path before. Every labyrinth conceals a descent. It begins subtly. The air thickens, the walls close in, and certainty dissolves. In myth, the hero's path downward is always preceded by arrogance. Icarus flies too high. Orpheus looks back too soon. Theseus forgets the promise of his sail. But beneath the moral lies a metaphysical truth. To descend is not to fail, but to enter the field of transformation. The soul must move through darkness to rediscover its light, for illumination without shadow is blindness, and purity without pain is illusion. The ancients knew this. When initiates entered the labyrinth of Crete or Egypt, they were symbolically walking into the underworld. The stone corridors represented the inner anatomy of consciousness, the intestines of the psyche, through which all unassimilated memories must pass. To walk such a path was to risk madness, for one's own monsters lived in its chambers. Yet those who endured emerged reborn, carrying the sacred scar of remembrance. The labyrinth thus became the original temple of psychology, a place where the unconscious was given architectural form. Jung later called this process individuation, but the ancients already understood it as initiation. The Minotaur is not a beast of external evil. It is the shadow, the hunger, rage, and desire repressed by consciousness. King Minos hides it, as the ego hides what it fears. But concealment breeds violence. To slay the Minotaur is to look unflinchingly at the self we deny, and in doing so, to reclaim its energy as strength. The sword that Theseus wields is awareness, and Ariadne's thread is compassion. One cuts through illusion, the other leads us home. In the esoteric schools of Egypt, descent was ritualized through architecture. The initiate entered the Hawara labyrinth blindfolded, guided only by trust and rhythm. 12 courts symbolized the zodiacal order, the cosmic body within which the human soul turns. Above, priests chanted hymns to the sun. Below, the silence of the tomb reminded the seeker that rebirth requires burial. The walls were inscribed with serpents, the Ouroboros of eternity devouring its tail, teaching that death and life are one spiral movement of divine respiration. To the mystic, descent is not punishment, but pedagogy. The spiral turns downward so the soul can learn the grammar of shadow. Every wound is a hieroglyph, every loss a teacher disguised as night. When you enter the inner labyrinth, you do not fight demons, you decode them. The labyrinth is a mirror system. Each corridor reflects an aspect of your forgotten self. The deeper you go, the more faces you meet. Anger, fear, envy, tenderness, all clamoring for integration. The task is not to banish them, but to bless them. Elizabeth Kim's vision of Sarah in the rubbish maze captures this perfectly. The goblin who piles toys upon her is the ego's defense mechanism, the comfort of old identities and possessions. To awaken, she must declare, "It's all junk." This is the spiritual rebellion of remembering. The seeker must smash the false bedroom of nostalgia to expose the cosmic studio beneath. Only then can the authentic self emerge, stripped of ornament, luminous with purpose. The labyrinth, like the psyche, is cleared by courage, not by avoidance. Modern psychology calls this process shadow integration. Alchemy called it nigredo, the blackening. The alchemist descends into matter as the soul descends into grief. Both are seeking the hidden gold, the light locked in density. In this phase, confusion is grace in disguise. When all maps fail, intuition awakens. When all light fades, the inner flame appears. The labyrinth is not testing you, it is tuning you. It rearranges your perception until you can see darkness not as enemy, but as fertile soil for rebirth. To resist the descent is to remain in half-life. Our culture worships ascent, success, positivity, transcendence, but the spiral mocks such linear ambition. It drags us back to the mud, reminding us that the lotus grows nowhere else. Pain is not regression, it is gestation. The labyrinth is the womb of the goddess, not her prison. Those who fear the dark never see the stars hidden within it. Thus, the seeker bows, not in defeat, but in reverence, for the shadow is the temple's threshold, and humility its door. In medieval cathedrals, this truth was embodied underfoot. Pilgrims crawling the labyrinth of Chartres did so on their knees, heads bowed. Each turn mirrored an act of penitence, each step a shedding of pride. When they reached the center, there was no idol, only an empty circle, the absence that contains all presence. This was theology written in geometry, the realization that God is not an object to be found, but the silence that remains when seeking ends. Descent, then, was the first half of ascent. So the soul learns to love its underworld. It lingers where light trembles, listens where language fails, and begins to feel the subtle pulse beneath despair. This is the alchemy of compassion. To descend and not flee, to see the monster and not hate, is to turn the labyrinth from punishment into sanctuary. When you can walk the winding path of your own darkness without flinching, the walls no longer imprison you. They sing, and in their echo, you hear the oldest truth. The way down and the way up are one. Emergence from darkness is never sudden. It unfolds like dawn, slow, tender, inevitable. After the long descent through shadow, the soul begins to sense movement beneath the silence. A warmth stirs in the heart, the first sign that transmutation has begun. The same corridors that once terrified now shimmer with recognition. Every wound becomes an opening, every echo a reminder that the labyrinth was never outside, but within. Transformation begins not by escaping pain, but by allowing it to soften into wisdom. Light does not invade the darkness, it blooms from it. The alchemists described this transition as albedo, the whitening after the blackness. The heart, once burdened by grief, starts to breathe again. The seeker discovers that the monster slain in the depths was never an enemy, but a guardian, holding fragments of forgotten love. Compassion becomes the true philosopher's stone, turning suffering into gold. This is not sentimentality, it is sacred chemistry. When pain is held without judgment, it becomes luminous. The soul that once trembled in despair now radiates gentleness, knowing that every scar is an illuminated scripture of endurance. To emerge from the labyrinth is not to escape it, but to carry its map in your veins. You move differently now, slower, aware of the sacred rhythm pulsing through all things. The turns and reversals that once felt cruel are seen as choreography. You understand that the path's confusion was your own resistance. The labyrinth never lied. It mirrored your chaos until you could see its pattern. Freedom arises when you realize there was never a monster at the center, only the still, patient presence of your own unbroken self. In this light, even time changes texture. The soul begins to experience eternity not as duration, but as depth. Each moment expands, revealing layers of meaning hidden beneath its surface. The labyrinth teaches this temporal alchemy. How to live cyclically instead of linearly, how to honor return as much as arrival. When you breathe with this rhythm, you cease to chase life and begin to participate in it. The present becomes infinite because it contains all your pasts reconciled, all your futures forgiven, spiraling inward toward the heart's eternal now. The seeker now becomes the guide. Having faced the shadow, you learn the language of empathy, the ability to see another's labyrinth without judgment. You recognize fear disguised as anger, grief masked as indifference, longing hidden beneath pride. This insight is the light you carry out of the depths. It does not shine to dazzle, but to remind. To help others walk their spiral is not to lead them, but to walk beside them. Every true teacher is simply one who has learned to love the dark without losing sight of the dawn. Ascent, in the spiritual sense, is not escape from the world, but re-entry with awareness. You return to ordinary life, but nothing is ordinary anymore. Every face is a symbol, every event an echo of the divine geometry beneath creation. The same street you once hurried through now feels like a temple corridor. The same sky now holds secret messages in its light. You begin to sense that the labyrinth extends beyond your life, woven through galaxies, thought, and breath. The personal and the cosmic reveal themselves as one tapestry. This realization births a quiet joy, unlike the excitement of discovery. It is serenity, the peace that arises when the opposites have reconciled. Shadow and light, chaos and order, descent and ascent are no longer enemies but lovers in eternal embrace. The heart becomes their meeting place, a crucible of divine paradox. Here, the soul ceases to strive. It simply radiates. You no longer need to reach the center because you have realized you are it. The labyrinth dissolves not by completion, but by recognition. The path and the walker were never separate. At this stage, the labyrinth becomes prayer in motion. Walking it is not about seeking, but celebrating. Each turn is gratitude embodied, each step a hymn to impermanence. The earth beneath your feet is no longer stone, but memory, the living memory of all who have walked before. You feel them in the silence. Monks, mystics, wanderers, all whispering the same vow, to keep walking, to keep remembering. The journey never ends, because consciousness itself is a labyrinth, endlessly unfolding toward its own source, endlessly finding itself anew in form. The philosopher's path ends where the poet's begins, in wonder. The mind, once obsessed with meaning, bows to the mystery it cannot contain. The labyrinth teaches that the ultimate knowledge is not conceptual but experiential. You do not think your way to the center, you feel your way there. Every heartbeat, every breath, every silence becomes a syllable in the language of the divine. To live this way is to walk eternally through revelation. The world becomes a sacred manuscript, and every curve of its script spells love. And so, having descended, confronted, and ascended, the soul stands quietly at the entrance once more, the labyrinth behind, the horizon ahead. But they are the same. You realize the path has no exit, because it was never a prison. It is the shape of existence itself, the spiral of return to what has always been. You take one final step, not out, but through, and the boundary dissolves, light and shadow merge. The heart becomes the compass. The journey continues, infinite, silent, and profoundly alive within you. The labyrinth is not walked only once. Every return to its entrance reveals another layer of memory, another echo of self. Time, that silent architect, curves upon itself, weaving past and future into a single breath. To those who awaken within it, time ceases to be a line and becomes a living spiral, a motion of remembrance rather than progress. The ancients called this eternal recurrence, not as punishment, but as perfection. What repeats is not failure, but refinement, each cycle polishing the rough stone of the heart into clarity. The myths that surround the labyrinth were never meant to be history. They were psychological blueprints. Theseus and Ariadne, Daedalus and the Minotaur, each is a reflection of the human psyche divided against itself. The hero, the guide, the monster, the maker. 4 aspects of the same soul. We build the labyrinth, wander through it, confront our own creation, and finally trace the thread back to the divine architect within. Myth, then, is memory encoded in symbol, the soul's way of writing its own autobiography across the fabric of eternity. In Egypt, Greece, and India alike, the labyrinth mirrored the cosmic order, the world as a pattern of descent and return. The Egyptian priests who tended the temple of Hawara believed that walking its chambers imitated the sun's nightly passage through the underworld. The Greeks imagined the spiral as the map of human fate. The Hindus saw it in the wheel of karma. Each culture spoke in its own tongue, yet all whispered the same secret, that creation itself is a labyrinth of light looping through shadow, seeking to know itself through form. When modern eyes look upon the labyrinth, they see geometry. The mystic sees cosmology. Each turn corresponds to a star, each passage to a breath of the divine. The center is not a destination, but a pulse, the still heart of the universe beating within the self. To walk it consciously is to harmonize with that pulse, to remember one's origin in the eternal. Thus, the labyrinth becomes both symbol and practice, an embodied prayer that collapses the distance between the microcosm and the macrocosm, between the seeker and the sought. Memory itself is a labyrinth, and forgetting its shadowed twin. The soul remembers in symbols, because symbols survive where words decay. Every lifetime is a return to an unfinished corridor, a chance to complete a gesture left incomplete in ages past. Déjà vu is the whisper of that recognition, the curve of a path once taken, the echo of a truth once known. The purpose of memory is not to cling, but to connect, to weave the scattered fragments of existence into coherence. The labyrinth teaches that remembrance is redemption. The philosopher who gazes backward through time sees that history, too, is spiral. Civilizations rise and fall, yet the myths they birth never die. They reincarnate in new forms. The Minoan labyrinth becomes the Christian pilgrimage. The alchemical furnace becomes the modern psyche. Humanity itself is walking one vast initiatory path, forgetting and remembering the same truths under different names. Progress is illusion. Only integration is real. We do not evolve away from our origins. We circle them, slowly comprehending what the ancients already inscribed in stone. The way out is the way in. Each soul carries an inner archive, a living temple of images, sensations, and archetypes. When you meditate, dream, or fall into silence, the door of that temple creaks open. You glimpse the corridors of your own mythic memory. Faces you've never met look back with recognition. Songs you've never heard stir the air of remembrance. This is the labyrinth of consciousness itself, where past lives and unborn futures coexist. To explore it is to realize that identity is fluid, that the I which walks is merely one mask of a timeless witness observing its own unfolding. At the heart of this revelation lies a paradox. The labyrinth teaches individuality through unity. Every traveler believes their path unique, yet all paths trace the same geometry. The turns differ, the rhythm varies, but the destination is one, a convergence at the still point of being. There, the distinctions between your journey and mine dissolve. We are not separate pilgrims, but facets of a single consciousness, exploring itself through infinite forms. The labyrinth reveals that the universe is not a collection of souls, but one soul dreaming it is many. In the silence of understanding, the walls of the labyrinth grow transparent. You see that even suffering was part of the sacred design. The losses, the mistakes, the delays, all were coordinates in the divine pattern guiding you toward compassion. The heart expands to hold it all, and gratitude replaces judgment. To remember your journey is to forgive it. The labyrinth is not a punishment to escape, but a masterpiece to be appreciated from within. Its corridors of time are the architecture of learning, and every turn is love teaching itself to endure. As the soul completes this circuit of remembrance, it realizes there is no final step, no absolute conclusion. The spiral continues beyond sight, carrying the traveler into subtler worlds of meaning. Yet something fundamental has changed. The fear of getting lost dissolves. You walk now, not to arrive, but to participate in the unfolding. The labyrinth remains eternal and unfinished, its walls built of memory and light, and the soul, at peace with the infinite motion of its own becoming, whispers the secret known to all who have returned. There was never anywhere else to be. In every age, the labyrinth reflects the divine mind contemplating itself. The gods are not outside its walls. They are the forces that shape each turn. To walk the labyrinth is to walk through myth, made flesh, to feel the pulse of archetypes breathing through your veins. Every hero who faced the Minotaur, every goddess who descended into shadow is alive within you. The labyrinth does not retell their stories, it reawakens them. For myth is not memory, it is presence. It unfolds again whenever a soul dares to seek its own beginning. In the Greek imagination, Daedalus built the labyrinth to contain chaos, but the gods ensured that what was meant to imprison would ultimately liberate. The Minotaur was the living secret of that paradox, a creature half divine, half monstrous, neither to be worshipped nor despised. It existed to remind mortals that the sacred and the profane share the same blood. When Theseus entered the maze, he was not slaying evil, but integrating duality. His victory was not over the beast, but over the illusion that light and darkness are separate powers. Ariadne's thread remains the most luminous of symbols, intuition as a bridge between worlds. The masculine hero and the feminine guide form the eternal polarity through which the labyrinth reveals its wisdom. Without the thread of remembrance, the voice of the soul, the intellect, becomes lost in its own complexity. Without the courage to walk, intuition remains untested. Their union births gnosis, the direct knowing that transcends both logic and faith. Every seeker must weave their own thread from the fibers of trust, compassion, and memory, and follow it inward toward truth. In the East, this same pattern unfolds through different mythic shapes. The Buddha's enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree is a labyrinth in stillness, each breath a step inward. The chakras spiral up the spine like the 7 circuits of the Cretan pattern, uniting heaven and earth within the body. The tantric yogi descends into matter, not to reject it, but to awaken it. The serpent coiled at the base of the spine is the Minotaur reborn, once feared, now revered. When it rises, the beast becomes energy. The labyrinth becomes light. The Egyptians gave the labyrinth cosmic magnitude. Beneath the sands of Hawara, priests walked the corridors, as symbolic journeys through the afterlife. The initiate passed from chamber to chamber as the sun passed from dusk to dawn, shedding forms like skins. Each wall bore carvings of gods who ruled thresholds. Thoth, the keeper of wisdom. Anubis, the guide of souls. To pass them was to confront one's own divinity and fear in equal measure. The labyrinth was the blueprint of resurrection. Where to know oneself was to know eternity. Myth and psychology mirror each other like twin serpents. What ancient initiates externalized in temple and ritual, modern seekers enact inwardly. The labyrinth's gods have moved into the psyche. Athena becomes wisdom. Dionysus, ecstasy. Hades, the unconscious. The same descent that once led through stone now unfolds through dreams. The mythic journey never ended. It simply changed dimension. Each of us is now both hero and monster, priest and pilgrim. The divine drama continues in the theater of the mind, where every emotion is a god speaking in disguise. To walk consciously is to restore reverence to the inner world. Every fear becomes a gatekeeper, every desire a messenger, every pain an initiation. The gods no longer demand sacrifice of animals or offerings of gold, they ask for awareness. To see your anger without denial, to feel your grief without fleeing, to hold your love without possession. This is the new ritual. The labyrinth of consciousness opens only to those who offer the currency of presence. The altar is the heart. The sacrifice is illusion. The reward is awakening. When you begin to perceive the labyrinth this way, the myth ceases to be allegory and becomes revelation. You understand that creation itself is a divine labyrinth through which the Absolute experiences its own infinity. Every creature, every atom, every star is a thread spun by the cosmic Ariadne, guiding spirit back to its own source. The gods are the voices of this remembering, calling from every corner of existence, whispering the same truth. The center is everywhere, and you are already walking within it. And still, mystery remains, for even revelation cannot end the labyrinth. It deepens it. The gods you meet within will change shape as you grow. Yesterday's savior may become tomorrow's threshold. The spiral of knowing never concludes. It refines. To live mythically is to walk this truth with humility, to realize that every certainty is but one more curve on the way to the infinite. Wisdom is not a rival, but participation in the ongoing dance of gods and mortals weaving each other's destinies across the corridors of time. Thus, the labyrinth becomes the mirror of the divine mind, vast, endless, compassionate. The soul that walks it joins the gods in their eternal contemplation. Each breath becomes a prayer, each heartbeat an echo of the universe recognizing itself. And when, at last, you glimpse your reflection in that mirror, you see not a traveler, but the labyrinth itself gazing back, an endless pattern of light and shadow, dreaming itself into form, remembering again that to know God is to walk forever deeper into the mystery of being. The labyrinth now moves from myth into mind. Its corridors are no longer carved in stone, but in consciousness. Every thought is a turning, every emotion a passage. The walls that once loomed around you have become the patterns of your own perception. Here, the monsters are memories. The shadows are unhealed echoes of the past. To walk this inner labyrinth is to enter the psyche itself, to descend into the architecture of dreams, where all that has been denied still breathes, waiting to be seen, understood, and released into light. The modern seeker carries no sword, only awareness. It is awareness that illuminates the chambers where forgotten selves still wander. When you pause and feel the texture of an old wound without running from it, you open a door. Behind that door lives the part of you that was exiled when you learned to hide your truth. Each encounter becomes a reunion. The frightened child, the silenced lover, the angry warrior, all are fragments of the same soul, each guarding an aspect of your strength. Wholeness is not perfection. It is hospitality to every part of yourself. Dreams are the labyrinth's language. They speak in riddles because the unconscious knows that understanding is not born from logic, but from participation. When you dream of chasing, falling, or wandering through shifting rooms, you are revisiting the corridors of your own psyche. The dreamer and the dreamed are the same traveler. Each symbol is a thread. Follow it, and it will lead you to the heart of what your waking mind cannot yet face. To interpret a dream is not to translate it, but to walk within it consciously until it reveals its music. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the alchemical union of conscious and unconscious. The labyrinth mirrors this perfectly. Its single path loops through darkness and light, balancing opposites until they dissolve into unity. The hero's task is not to conquer, but to integrate, to turn the outer war into inner dialogue. The Minotaur, once feared, becomes an ally. The labyrinth becomes a sanctuary. This is the psychology of the soul, ancient myth reborn as modern healing, the ritual of awakening carried quietly within each act of self-awareness. Anxiety, despair, and confusion are the labyrinth's sentinels. They appear not to block you, but to alert you that another layer of illusion is near. When you meet them without resistance, they transform. Anxiety becomes energy. Despair becomes depth. Confusion becomes curiosity. Every emotion is alchemical potential in disguise. The labyrinth teaches that freedom does not lie in control, but in surrender, trusting that the path, however tangled, is intelligent. What you call suffering is simply the soul's way of rearranging your vision until you can see with the heart. Silence is the labyrinth's companion. When words dissolve, the path becomes clear. In the quiet, you hear the subtle hum of existence weaving through your own breath. Thought slows to rhythm. Rhythm slows to presence. Meditation is nothing more than this, listening to the labyrinth from within. The mind, accustomed to walls, begins to perceive open space. What once felt confining now reveals itself as infinite. The seeker discovers that there is no maze to escape, only patterns to observe, no enemy to defeat, only energies to harmonize, and no exit, only awareness expanding. The therapeutic journey mirrors this sacred walk. The therapist becomes Daedalus, offering structure, the patient, Theseus, entering the unknown. Together they follow the thread of story and memory until they reach the beast at the center, the raw, unfiltered truth of being. There, words often fail, and tears become the new language. Healing occurs not because the labyrinth is solved, but because it is honored. When pain is witnessed without fear, it transforms from burden to blessing. The heart, once armored, opens again, and the corridors fill with light. In the modern world, distraction is the new labyrinth. Its walls are built of screens and noise, its corridors filled with artificial light. Yet the ancient pattern still calls, whispering beneath the digital hum. Even now, a moment of stillness, a breath of awareness, can bring you back to the original path. The labyrinth is eternal because it exists in consciousness, not culture. Technology may reshape the outer world, but the inner pattern remains unchanged. The soul still yearns to walk the spiral, to remember itself through wonder and silence. Awakening is not the end of the labyrinth. It is the realization that there was never an end. The path loops endlessly because consciousness is infinite. The more you awaken, the more you see that awakening has no summit. You simply become more transparent to the divine light that has always walked beside you. To live awake is to live as the labyrinth itself, fluid, mysterious, compassionate. You guide others not by leading, but by being a mirror in which they recognize their own thread of gold, winding homeward through time. And when all is still, you understand the simplest truth. You were never lost. Every turn, every confusion, every sorrow was the hand of the labyrinth, guiding you back to yourself. The psyche and the cosmos are one spiral, endlessly reflecting each other. To know this is liberation, not from the world, but into it. You rise from the inner chambers, carrying the light of awareness in your heart. The journey continues. Quiet, sacred, infinite, each step a prayer, each breath the universe remembering its own name through you. The labyrinth is not merely a metaphor for life, it is also the architecture of death. Every descent into its depths is a rehearsal for the final passage, every return a resurrection. Ancient initiates walked the spiral not to escape mortality, but to understand it, to taste the dissolution of self and the reweaving of spirit into the larger fabric of being. Death, they knew, was not annihilation, but transition, the soul's spiral into subtler dimensions of consciousness. Each turn prepares us for that sacred letting go, teaching surrender before the body must learn it. In Egypt, the priests of Osiris taught that death was a continuation of the labyrinthine journey of the sun. Each night, the solar god entered the underworld, confronting serpents, shadows, and gates of fire before rising reborn at dawn. This rhythm was not symbolic, it was cosmic truth. Life and death were two halves of one circular breath. The soul followed the same pattern. To die is to pass through the dark corridor of forgetting, and to live again is to remember. The labyrinth thus became the bridge between worlds, guiding souls through eternity's pulse. To the Greeks, Hades was not punishment, but initiation. Persephone's descent each autumn mirrored the natural law of regeneration. When she returned, the world bloomed anew. This myth revealed the labyrinth as seasonal, cyclical, endlessly self-renewing. Every sorrow contains its seed of spring. Every ending conceals a new beginning. The spiral ensures nothing is truly lost. It merely changes form. The seeker who embraces this rhythm discovers immortality not as duration, but as transformation, an ongoing exchange of matter and spirit, of shadow and light, dancing without rest in sacred reciprocity. In the alchemical tradition, this rhythm became the great work, the opus magnum, the transformation of lead into gold, ego into essence. The labyrinth was its secret map, showing the stages of dissolution, purification, and rebirth. The alchemist dies many small deaths, the death of pride, of certainty, of separation. Each death clears a corridor, each rebirth expands awareness. The gold they sought was never metal, but consciousness itself, luminosity born from integration. The philosopher's stone was the awakened heart, forged in the fire of self-knowledge, shining unconsumed within the labyrinth of being. The mystic understands that rebirth is not linear, but recursive. We die and are born countless times within one lifetime, each grief, each realization, a miniature initiation. When love ends, when identity collapses, when certainty breaks, something deeper stirs beneath the rubble. These are the moments the labyrinth folds inward, inviting the soul to descend again. If you can stay, if you can breathe within the ruins, you will feel the first pulse of renewal rising quietly beneath the ashes. Death and life are not opposites. They are the inhalation and exhalation of the same divine breath. The spiral's secret is that it never closes. Each revolution brings you nearer to the center, yet also carries you beyond it. The self you were yesterday cannot follow into today's circle. It must dissolve. This is the true meaning of transcendence, not escape from the human, but continual shedding of form. The labyrinth's teaching is ruthless in its compassion. Hold nothing, not even enlightenment. The soul that clings to illumination will lose it. The soul that walks freely will find it again and again, each time deeper, quieter, more complete. In this endless motion, grief becomes sacred. To mourn is to honor transformation. Every loss reminds you that you are part of a universe forever changing shape, forever remembering and forgetting itself. The labyrinth humbles the heart into gratitude for the fleeting, for the imperfect, for the transient beauty of all things. The mystic kneels before impermanence as before an altar, understanding that the divine is not elsewhere but here, shimmering in every moment that dies as it is born. To love fully is to let everything go and call it holy. Modern life hides from death, yet it surrounds us in subtler ways. Relationships ending, seasons passing, identities dissolving. To resist these deaths is to become trapped in the outer corridors, wandering the same turns in fear. But to accept them is to step into the sacred geometry of renewal. When you say yes to loss, the labyrinth opens into light. You begin to perceive eternity moving through time, the invisible hand of change sculpting your soul. Each goodbye becomes initiation, each silence a womb, each emptiness a door into infinity. This understanding reshapes how you live. You begin to walk slower, speak softer, listen deeper. Every act becomes a ritual of reverence. Washing your hands, lighting a candle, watching dusk fall. Each becomes a miniature descent and return. The labyrinth teaches presence through repetition, showing that holiness lies not in escape, but in attention. To be fully present in the mundane is to uncover the miraculous. When you live this way, you no longer need to seek transformation. You become it. Every breath is a death and a rebirth made visible. And so the spiral continues, through death, through life, through countless incarnations of form and meaning. You begin to see that there is no final liberation, only deeper intimacy with the infinite. The labyrinth is both tomb and cradle, both dissolution and emergence. It devours and delivers, destroys and reveals. To die consciously is to walk its final circle with open eyes, to see the pattern dissolve into the vastness from which it came. And in that last step, the soul remembers the oldest secret. Nothing ends, everything returns. The labyrinth is not merely a path, but a temple built without walls. Every curve is a column of invisible meaning, every center a sanctuary of awakening. Unlike human structures raised from ambition, the labyrinth's design emerges from the language of the cosmos itself. Spirals appear in galaxies, in hurricanes, in the shells of mollusks, in the chambers of the heart. The pattern is universal because consciousness has always sought to know itself through motion. To walk the labyrinth is to step into harmony with that cosmic architecture, to participate in creation's own meditation. In ancient times, temples were mirrors of heaven. Architects aligned their stones with stars, carved sacred geometry into walls, and built corridors that guided the initiate from darkness to light. The labyrinth follows the same principle, but internalized. Its geometry is not meant to be viewed from above, but lived from within. You do not observe its perfection, you become it. Each turn calibrates the body and the soul, synchronizing heartbeat, breath, and awareness until you move as the universe moves. The labyrinth's true blueprint is not in stone, but in your nervous system. Every sacred site across the world echoes this design. The spirals carved into the stones of Newgrange, the coiled paths of Hopi sand paintings, the mandalas of Tibet, all arise from the same archetypal intelligence. The labyrinth is humanity's oldest cathedral, drawn not by one culture, but by the soul's collective memory. It requires no roof because the sky itself is its dome. It needs no altar because the center of the walker is the altar. Wherever you walk it, cathedral floor, forest clearing, or inner vision, you are entering the same timeless temple. To modernize, the labyrinth's simplicity disguises its sophistication. Its geometry is neither random nor decorative. It encodes a metaphysical formula. The single winding path represents unity concealed within multiplicity. The alternating turns symbolize the dance of opposites, contraction and expansion, inhalation and exhalation, descent and return. The center is the still point, the unmoved mover at the heart of all motion. Walking, it is not superstition, but embodiment, a physical enactment of the soul's geometry. The feet become prayers, tracing infinity into the dust of the world. In this sense, the labyrinth is the feminine temple of wisdom. While pyramids ascend and towers reach skyward, the spiral turns inward, embracing, containing. It invites rather than commands. It teaches not through revelation from above, but through resonance from within. To walk, it is to remember that divinity does not dwell in the heavens, but in the heart's quiet chambers. The labyrinth does not ask for belief, it asks for presence. Its faith is experiential. Its ritual is movement. Its priesthood is everyone who dares to walk with awareness. Architecture, in the sacred sense, is always pedagogy. The walls of the labyrinth are the lines of a silent scripture, written not in words, but in proportions. When you move through them, you are reading creation's grammar with your body. Every step recites a cosmic verse. Every turn completes a sentence in the language of being. This is why silence feels different within its pattern. It is not absence, but resonance. The labyrinth amplifies the inner voice, transforming ordinary movement into a liturgy of remembrance, a dialogue between the human and the infinite. The true initiate learns to carry the labyrinth within. Once you have walked it with reverence, its pattern imprints upon your consciousness. In moments of confusion, you feel its rhythm guiding you. In moments of despair, its center holds you steady. You realize that prayer, meditation, art, and even love are extensions of this same geometry, spirals of communion drawing you toward the sacred within all forms. The temple ceases to be a location and becomes a frequency. Wherever you are, awareness becomes architecture, and presence becomes prayer. In this realization, the distinction between body and temple dissolves. The spine becomes the axis mundi, the heart, the inner sanctum, the breath, the bell that calls the soul to worship. To care for the body is to maintain the sacred site through which consciousness experiences creation. Each heartbeat echoes the labyrinth's center. Each inhalation redraws its pattern in light. You begin to understand that holiness is not elsewhere. The universe is your sanctuary, and your life, when lived with awareness, is its eternal ceremony. Walking the labyrinth becomes the purest form of meditation because it unites opposites, body and spirit, motion and stillness, silence and song. As you move, thoughts dissolve into rhythm, and rhythm dissolves into presence. The labyrinth teaches not by concept, but by participation. It shows that enlightenment is not escape from embodiment, but immersion in it. When the walker and the path become indistinguishable, consciousness recognizes itself as both architect and pilgrim, both temple and worshipper. The design was never meant to impress, it was meant to awaken. When the walker finally stands in the center, there is no revelation, no booming voice, no miracle, only stillness, vast enough to contain everything. The labyrinth's true teaching is humility, that the divine hides in plain sight, in breath, in dust, in repetition. To step out of the center is not to leave the sacred space, but to realize it extends everywhere. The entire world is the labyrinth's continuation, and your movement through it, every choice, every pause, is a sacred step in the architecture of awakening that never ends. In the modern age, the labyrinth has changed its form. No longer drawn on stone or soil, it has migrated into systems, economic, digital, psychological. The new labyrinths are invisible, built of information and ideology, shaped by our desires and fears. We wander through networks, advertisements, and algorithms that promise connection but breed confusion. The ancient pattern persists beneath these illusions, but its sacred purpose has been inverted. Where the old labyrinth revealed the soul, the new one conceals it. Yet even here, amidst neon and noise, the thread of awakening still glows faintly. We mistake this complexity for progress. We think faster, build higher, communicate louder, but we rarely listen. The labyrinth of modernity thrives on distraction. Its corridors are lined with mirrors reflecting endless versions of the self, none entirely real. The seeker today must navigate not beasts of myth, but the subtler monsters of apathy, vanity, and perpetual consumption. The Minotaur has become the ego itself, hungry and restless, feeding on attention. And yet, the labyrinth remains merciful. It always holds a path back to center, even when that center has been forgotten. To recognize the labyrinth of the world is the first act of liberation. You begin to see that what feels like chaos is not random, but rhythmic. Every crisis, every loss, every system collapse is a message encoded in complexity. The collective soul, like the individual one, moves through spirals of learning. Humanity, too, walks a labyrinth, its civilizations turning, collapsing, renewing, seeking the heart of meaning beneath the machinery of progress. When we remember this, despair softens into responsibility. We are not lost. We are mid-initiation as a species. In this collective journey, technology becomes both challenge and teacher. The digital labyrinth mirrors the mind itself, endlessly branching, full of reflection, capable of connection or confusion. To enter it consciously is to reclaim it as sacred architecture. Each click, each message, each interaction becomes a step in awareness rather than addiction. The thread is attention. When you hold it, you transform the web from trap to tapestry, from maze to mandala. The labyrinth of the modern world is not to be escaped, but redeemed through mindful participation. Society's myths have shifted, but their structure remains the same. We still create heroes, monsters, and gods, only now they wear corporate logos or political banners. Our temples are skyscrapers. Our rituals are transactions. Our pilgrimages are scrolling through screens. Yet beneath this parody of sacredness, the same yearning burns, to remember what is real. The labyrinth reminds us that even illusion is holy when recognized as illusion. The world's noise becomes a mantra when heard without judgment. The seeker's task is not withdrawal, but awakening within the storm. Philosophers once spoke of the labyrinth of reason, where logic turns upon itself until it reveals paradox. Today, the labyrinth has expanded into global consciousness, a vast network of dreams, data, and desire. Its danger is not entrapment, but amnesia. To survive it, we must recover the contemplative mind, the capacity to see patterns without being consumed by them. The wise do not flee the labyrinth. They learn its language. They read the symbols encoded in daily life and find guidance where others see only confusion. The modern initiate walks with eyes open and heart anchored. The labyrinth of society is also the crucible of compassion. In the crowd's chaos, we learn the art of empathy. Every face you pass is a mirror. Every stranger, another curve of the same divine design. To live awake in the world's labyrinth is to love without attachment, to act without expectation, to serve without ownership. The thread that leads home is kindness, simple, direct, unbreakable. Amidst cities of noise and ambition, a single gesture of compassion becomes a point of light, a reminder that the labyrinth still holds its center in the human heart. Yet the seeker must beware. Cynicism is the labyrinth's dead end. To believe that meaning is lost is to stop walking. The spiral continues only through faith, not in dogma, but in possibility. Every culture that has survived its own collapse did so by remembering the invisible center, by returning to humility, to service, to reverence. The labyrinth of civilization will endure as long as there are souls who still walk it consciously, who see beyond the mirrored illusions and hold the golden thread for others when they cannot see their own. The awakening of the individual becomes the awakening of the world. As each person reclaims their inner labyrinth, society itself begins to reorient toward harmony. The invisible architecture of consciousness reshapes the visible architecture of cities. Systems soften, hierarchies dissolve, cooperation replaces conquest. The labyrinth is the blueprint of a new civilization, one rooted not in competition, but coherence, not in dominance, but dialogue. Humanity's task is to remember that its greatest technology is awareness itself, the living thread that connects every being to the heart of creation. And so the outer labyrinth reveals itself as reflection of the inner one. The world's complexity is but the soul's mirror on a grand scale. What appears fragmented is secretly whole. To walk through the chaos of modern existence with eyes of reverence is to sanctify it. You do not need to escape the city to find the temple. You need only remember that every sound, every stranger, every moment is part of the same design. The labyrinth was never lost. It simply changed form, waiting for us to recognize ourselves within its living pattern. The journey ends where it began, in mystery. You stand again before the entrance, the same stone threshold, the same breath of silence. Yet everything is different, because you are different. The labyrinth has not changed, but the one who walks it has been remade. You entered seeking answers. You emerge as the question itself. The mind longs for finality, but the soul knows there is none. The spiral does not close. It opens into infinity. The end of the path is the beginning of perception, the dawning realization that the traveler and the labyrinth are one consciousness awakening to itself. The ancients called this return theosis, the becoming of the divine through experience. It is not exaltation, but remembrance. The spark that once entered the labyrinth of matter now recognizes its own flame, reflected in every atom. You begin to see that all forms of separation were temporary veils cast by learning. The monster you feared, the love you sought, the gods you worshipped, they were all mirrors guiding you toward unity. The labyrinth never imprisoned you. It sculpted you, shaping the rough stone of ego into a vessel fit to hold the uncontainable light of being. In this moment, the center reveals itself not as a destination, but as awareness. There is no throne, no deity waiting to speak, only stillness vast enough to contain creation. The labyrinth's geometry dissolves into pure presence. The sound of your own heartbeat becomes the universe breathing. You realize that you have never left this place, that the center was with you in every turn, in every confusion, in every breath of longing. The path's illusion was the veil of forgetfulness. Enlightenment is not found at the center. It is the recognition that the center has always been everywhere. When you turn to look back, the path behind you shimmers like a dream fading at dawn. You see its pattern for the first time from above. Every pain, every detour, every lost hour, forming a perfect design. The symmetry is breathtaking. What once felt meaningless now reveals purpose. What once seemed cruel now radiates compassion. The labyrinth was the curriculum of your becoming, and you were both student and teacher. The thread you followed, the slender, golden line of faith, was woven by your own deeper self, the aspect of you that never forgot the way home. Now you walk differently. You move not to arrive, but to express. Every gesture becomes prayer, every word a vibration of truth. You begin to live as the labyrinth lives, spiraling outward in generosity, inward in contemplation. You teach not by preaching, but by presence. You guide not by direction, but by example. To walk awake is to turn daily life into sacred ceremony, to wash a dish as if polishing a relic, to speak as if shaping creation, to breathe as if sustaining worlds. The ordinary becomes the miracle, because perception has been purified of separation. The soul that has reached the center carries its silence into the world. It knows that there are no others, only reflections of the same consciousness wearing countless faces. Compassion ceases to be duty and becomes instinct. Love is no longer an emotion, but a state of vision, the ability to see the divine even in distortion. Every stranger becomes a fragment of your own eternity. Every enemy becomes an unintegrated piece of the cosmic puzzle. When you bless them, you bless yourself. When you forgive them, the labyrinth within you rearranges into harmony. This understanding births a new kind of strength, one that no longer seeks to dominate, but to illuminate. The warrior of the spirit wields no sword, but carries light into forgotten corridors. Wherever fear lingers, they walk softly, bringing remembrance. They do not destroy darkness, they teach it how to shine. To live this way is to continue the labyrinth's work, not as victim or seeker, but as architect, building invisible paths of awareness through every encounter. You become Daedalus redeemed, designing not prisons, but portals, shaping the world into a mirror of the divine pattern. And yet, humility deepens, for the more light you hold, the more mystery you see. The labyrinth expands beyond comprehension, revealing galaxies within atoms, infinities within thought. You realize that awakening is not escape from the unknown, but marriage to it. The wise do not claim to know. They bow before the endless unfolding. The labyrinth is God thinking, dreaming, becoming aware through experience. Every moment you live consciously, you participate in that act of creation. The divine does not sit apart from existence. It breathes through you, discovering itself in your heartbeat. In the final silence, The boundaries between self and source dissolve. There is no center, no circumference, only awareness without edge. The labyrinth collapses into light, and that light folds back into silence. Time ceases, and what remains is pure being, an ocean of stillness shimmering with the memory of form. You are no longer the traveler. You are the path, the question, the answer, and the wind that moves through them all. Eternity does not stretch forward. It blossoms here, now, in the infinite immediacy of presence.